Well, we can now get more on our top story, and that's the confirmation of Chuck Hagel as the U.S. Defense Secretary. Jason Johnson is a political analyst, and he's a professor of political science at Hiram College. He joins us now from Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks very much for being here with us. Now, Hagel is seen as less of a hawk. He was one of the few senators that refused to sign a letter of solidarity with Israel, also was against more sanctions in Iran. Tell us more about the man that is now going to be at the helm of the defense machinery.
He is a throwback to an era that the Republican Party does not want to remember. There were a time in the late 70s, early 80s when there were Republicans who actually had the audacity to question America's policy in relationship with Israel. There was a time where we had Republicans who didn't always think that American military might had to be used to solve every single problem. And that's the kind of man that Chuck Hagel is. He does not fit with the modern Republican Party, and therefore they were offended and quite angry that Barack Obama chose him to be defense secretary. But fortunately for the president, he was able to get the nomination to push through.
Given his point of view, and as you say, a throwback to another time, what kind of an impact is he expected to have on the defense strategy that the U.S. is pursuing at the moment?
Well, he'll probably have a negligible impact, and that's what's important. You contrast Chuck Hagel to, say, a Hillary Clinton. She was a star in her own right, and plus she was going to be behaving a lot more independently. She would travel around the world as Secretary of State. The Defense Secretary is primarily in Washington. He is primarily in the United States. He is pretty much just going to be the right arm or the left arm of Barack Obama. So there's not going to be much that Chuck Hagel will do which will differ from the kind of work that Barack Obama's been doing, which is more or less an extension of Bush's foreign policy.
Now, one of the things he'll probably be looking very carefully at as he comes into this position is the sequester at the end of the week, the budget cuts, which will also hit defense. Tell us about the type of challenges he's going to face with that.
Well, they're huge challenges, and actually, Chuck Hagel's confirmation problems are a reflection of what's happening with the sequester. Things that used to be simple and matter-of-fact procedures in the government, which is the president getting to pick their defense secretary, have suddenly become huge partisan circuses. Things that were simple, like raising the debt ceiling or simply coming up with a budget, have been almost impossible in Washington since the Republicans took over the lower house in 2010. So what Chuck Hagel has just gone through, he's prepared for the sequester. He's prepared for those sorts of arguments with Congress, because our military, along with several other important, critical key parts of American government, are about to be affected, and we don't know when they're going to have a comfortable and reasonable budget solution.
Now, it's hard to remember when a defense secretary has had to go through this kind of a confirmation process with the Republicans and the Democrats both at odds. How much more difficult does this make his job, the fact that, he's already had to jump through so many hurdles?
Well, there was John Tower in 1989. The Democrats held him up for about 3 months. Ultimately, this is not going to make his job that much more difficult, because the reality is the Secretary of Defense simply talks to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and says, look, what are the needs that our military has? And at the end, the members of Congress who are on the appropriations committees, they're still going to give money. They're still going to fund the government. They're still going to end up funding the military. So while his personal relationships with many Republicans and many senators may have been frayed, it's not going to prevent him from being able to do his job, because ultimately his job is to just do what Obama wants.
Jason Johnson, good to get your thoughts. Thanks very much for talking to us. France's defense minister